Metaphysician's Companion.
Good afternoon, John. How are you today?
Good afternoon, Graham. I'm well.
What are we up to now? What number?
This is number 11.
Number 11. Wow, okay. So where are we going to go today with this
I
conversation?
think it's time to do free will.
Free will. Wow, what a subject that is.
Do we have free will? That's the question for today.
I think the answer to that one is yes, but.
Yes, but.
But a lot of buts.
Yeah, I mean, the extreme on the other end is determinism, or what I call hard determinism, saying everything is based on cause and effect from the past.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I think hard determinism is not a viable option.
I think you have free will within confines of how your life is being played out. For example, like we talked before about when you're younger, how your life is molded by your parents and whatever, and how you react to those things and how you developed a personality and stuff around that.
We learn to behave within a culture.
Yeah, exactly.
Really
So the free will is then coloured by that start in life, and it continues through the whole of life. In my opinion, it doesn't just stop there, because you do have free will and you can make choices. There's no doubt about that. But those choices, they're made with the biases one has learned.
Oh, absolutely.
So is that really free will?
Well, the way I look at it is life is a learning experience. That I learned, like as a very small child, as he's pointed out, like in whatever your family of origin is, or whatever origin it is, you learn how to be a person within the culture that you grow up in. And that learning comes, automatically even. Like we look, we copy, and frequently do not reconsider what it is that we have learned. Now, one of my pet peeves is people call it, my conditioning has done X to me. Mm-hmm. And I don't like that, because it has the appearance of giving control to the external world. I like to say I have learned to be this way.
But the external world does also condition you as well.
There are strong messages and strong stimuli to behave in a particular way. But, I learn how to adapt to that. It can be a forced choice. I'm not saying it can't be.
You've learned how to adapt, but other people don't. So they are affected by that. And I think good examples of that is when countries, for example, have a dictatorship and the messages keep on getting sent out. You need to do this, you need to be this, you need to be that. And this is the way you need to be for your country, or whatever it may be.
Oh, yeah, it's sort of, the big lie.
The big lie. I mean, I can remember talking to a lady years and years ago when I worked for a major department store in London, and she used to be the person who looked after the Venetian blinds. Mm-hmm. Very exciting. Anyway, she was an ex-actress, and her husband was a very famous comedian at the time. Had been a very comedian, and her son was an actor too. And I remember her telling me that when the Second World War broke out, she and her husband and friends were having a picnic. It was a nice day, and they were having a picnic, and they had the old-fashioned portable radio, which in those days was the size of a house.
It weighed about 10 kilos.
Yeah. Well, they used to take 90-volt batteries, so you can plus a 1.5 battery for the valves. But anyway, the reason I remember that because I had one. Anyway, and she remembered when the boys heard, they all cheered, and they said, "Right, we're all going to sign up." And this shows how they've been moulded to believe that they had to go and serve their country and literally die for their country.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the big lie itself was actually Adolf Hitler wrote about it in his book Mein Kampf.
Oh, have you read it?
No, I haven't. My German's not that good.
I thought you might be a secret Nazi underneath.
But the idea is that if you tell a lie often enough, it becomes the truth.
Absolutely.
Yeah, basically it's what everybody accepts as true. Yeah, and that's why I think the free will, to me, is when you look at something that isn't working in your life, and you say, ask yourself, what am I doing this for? What's happening here? And when you bring it out of your automatic responses into your neocortex and think about it, that's when you actually have the ability to make a choice.
Yeah, that happened to me when I was younger. When I was at boarding school, I was bullied an awful lot.
Mm-hmm.
And when I left school to start work, the first thing I said to myself was, I'm not going to put up with that ever again. I made a conscious decision. I didn't want to go through that drama of being bullied again. So I thought, okay, when I'm now going into work, and I'm going to train train to be a buyer, which was a con. But anyway, I trained to be a buyer for a department store. I made the decision that I wouldn't be intimidated by anybody ever again.
Yeah, that's what they often talk about, the victim mentality or victim syndrome or whatever you like, is that people learn to be victims.
Well, to be honest, it got me into trouble too once, because that attitude came through, and one day when I was working, I got called into the office of the H&R manager of another place I was working with, and he was an ex-major general in the army in the Second World War, and he kept his title and blah, blah, and he was the HR manager. And he came up with this story, and I said, no, that wasn't me. And he said, are you calling me a liar? And I said, basically trying to bully me to say yes. And I said, no, I'm not a liar. I'm telling you the truth. This is what happened. That is not my writing. It was not me. Yes, that was my particular book. I wrote orders in, etc., but it was not me. That's not my writing. And he said, you calling me a liar again? I said, no, I'm not calling you a liar. And he kept on going with this and whatever. And in the end, I just said to him, well, I only tell you the truth. And if you don't believe the truth, that's your problem. And just because you've been in command of people and think you can tell people what to think, and you can go and get, I won't use the words, but I said, blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, I was shown the door immediately after that.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. And then he bullied my superior, who came out in favour of me and said, if you go on his side, if you take his view and say it's true, I will sack you. And of course, what happened was this particular gentleman had a family and 3 kids, and was his living. So he basically agreed. He was bullied into accepting somebody else's view.
So that's what we're talking about here is a power relationship.
Yeah.
And the power. But did he accept the view personally, or did he just go along with it? He
was bullied in it. He knew I was telling the truth.
Yeah.
That was fine, whatever. So I accepted that. I just told him, you have to do what you have to do because you've got wife and kids. I haven't, so that's fine.
Yeah. So we're looking at a behaviour that your manager, direct manager, chose to pursue because of financial commitments, personal commitments, even though he didn't believe the justification for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had to, in a sense, what I'm trying to say, he had to accept the truth, to accept the story this other guy was giving because of the circumstances. So the free will of, what I'm trying to get at, the free will had gone.
Yeah, well,
I exercised my free will and got sacked.
Yeah,
he exercised his free will and accepted what the guy said.
The price of his true free will was too high to pay.
So I pay. Yeah, which is interesting because I think that's what happens in life a lot. You
compromise.
You compromise because you've got no choice. I had a choice and I took it, which probably for the time did me harm. But the bottom line, I stood by my principles. For me at the time was more important.
Yeah.
So yeah, what I'm trying to say is free will can be manipulated to make somebody bend to what you want.
Yeah. That's where it sort of becomes very kind of fuzzy. Yeah, like it's like
I've sort of gone off track here. I know.
I look at it all as choice points.
Yeah.
You know, I think for me that makes it a lot much easier to understand. You know, how did I come to make the choice? Yeah, the choice to compromise one's principles, or to say this is of more value to me than the job and feeding my family.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is like our actions and behaviours can modify our choices. That's what that's telling me. But if that man had made the choice purely because the boss told me to think this way, and I do without thinking about it, that choice is then made by the one that you were talking about with the radio, and the war has started. Let's go and kill those Huns. King and country.
Yeah. It's only when you got in the trenches you realise how a lot of bullshit it really was. Yeah, but so our free will can be, well, I'm trying to get our so-called free will can be manipulated. Doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah.
It means that basically you have to be very wary of it and what you can and can't do, in a sense, because it's...
By the same token, I think there are a lot of people that go around and don't really ever bother to make a free will choice. I don't, like that in the sense that you're talking about the war is declared and they say, okay, we're in, we will do this without thinking of the consequences. It's an automatic decision that hasn't been made with conscious intent.
True.
And I think a lot of people go through life doing that. Oh, you've got to get a job and you've got to do this and you've got to have a family, you've got to do XXX, whatever the social norm requires. And it's very difficult to choose to be, sit down and go, right, I'm going to be a shaman and do exactly what I want to do. From a Western society, it takes an enormous, commitment to change.
But wouldn't a Western society be, say, better than, say, if you're living under Sharia rule or something like that? Wouldn't that? Because there is actually literally no choice for those.
Yeah. Well, different societies have different amounts of tolerance for difference.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to is, how far, this is the norm, and how from the norm can you be before the authorities start saying, hey, that's just too far.
Yeah, but I think what I'm trying to get at here is I think we certainly in the Western world, we have the ability, and not the abilities perhaps, but what we... Opportunity to use free will more than you would say in a more secular society. It's moved that way over the last 70, 80 years.
Well, any society, I think, that has a central authority figure, and whether that be the Pope or the
king,
king, or the
Presidente.
Just trying to think what the highest one in the Muslim.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Ayatollahs in Iran, for example.
Yeah.
They say this is the way the world is. This is how you should look at it. This is how you should behave. This is how you think. And I mean, when I was younger, people would talk about the thought police.
Yeah.
They come and control the way you think.
I think free will more is about you get to a point in life where you start saying, okay, I need to question this and look into it and then make choices, inform choices from knowledge you may have gained or understanding what you were taught or what you developed through childhood or whatever it may be that isn't exactly true, and you need to move on from that.
Huh.
So it's the opening of the mind to say there are other alternatives. What is the truth? And is it the truth for you rather than the truth for anybody else?
Yes. And one of the ways I look at it is what part of my brain is actually making the choice. One thing I have observed is that there are a lot of people that the automatic part usually has a pathway that runs through the amygdala, which means emotional. That choice to go to war is purely emotional. It hasn't entered the neocortex for consideration. And it's being able to notice those automatic responses, ones that you've trained yourself to do so you don't have to think about it, and notice the ones that work for you and the ones that work against you, and to reassess and retrain your mind to make the decisions that you want that are in accordance with your deepest principles. That's my view.
Yeah, well, of course, then principles have to be developed. They're not something that actually is there.
Oh, yeah.
Principles are learned like that, like everything else in life. So it's about you questioning the principles, for example, you were brought up with. Like, for example, you were brought up in a particular faith, like Catholic faith. So you have that principles of that faith. So and it's only when you start to question it that you start to find your own principles in life that will take you to perhaps another level and make you to think about another way of living. And what is that way of living, and how can that help you become, for want of a better word, a better person?
Well, one of the places that I looked at first off, without even realizing I was doing it, was ethics.
Yeah.
What are your ethics? And the end justifies the means is an ethical position.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that was horrific. I perform an action in order to choose a result. I don't know until that result has been achieved or not achieved whether I'm a good person or a bad person.
That's true.
If the end justifies the means and I do terrible things and don't achieve that end, then I've done terrible things. I go, gee, that's just no good. And I ended up choosing the ethics of virtue, which says there are virtues like non-violence and truthfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And if I follow these principles, then I will be doing good things. If the virtues are truly virtuous, then I'll be doing good things. It's like if I go to help somebody and inadvertently or for reasons beyond my control, I fail, then I still have done the right thing, by following my virtue.
So is free choice, like you're putting it, a spiritual value of any sort?
I think taking an ethical position is a spiritual value because it's about clarifying the mind. For example, like in the Yoga Sutras, they say that lying clouds the buddhi. What that says is that it gets in the way of your intuition, and we've spoken about intuition before.
Mm-hmm.
It comes from the deepest part of yourself. So we practice truthfulness in order to understand if I'm telling myself lies.
So we're talking about being in the physical world, about free will.
Yeah.
So is free will then available in your spiritual development life? I've really shifted the subject here.
That's the way I see it, without clearly going through the intellectual part, is if I become completely identified with myself at centre, which is the spiritual part, for want of a better word, that which is eternal, that which is real, and I can act directly from that. That is the essence of free will. But as we pointed out, that what happens is this part of myself that we come into this world and we take on a role, which once again, that is like a cloak over the essential self, and then we operate through it. And this is where we become clouded, if I can use that expression, is that sometimes it is not possible for free will be enacted through the cloak, the role that I'm playing. And that's how I see it. Yeah.
But also, to make decisions about free will, you also need knowledge and wisdom.
Absolutely.
And if you have knowledge and wisdom, then you can make free will choices which are better for you than the ones you make, say, mentally, emotionally, or whatever. So because all sales, for example, are emotional. People don't believe it, but all selling of some form or other is an emotional choice in the end by the client or the person who's buying. So, in a sense, the salesman is then touching your emotional base to get you to buy something.
Oh yeah, yeah. The issue for me, I think, in that way is, am I behaving reactively?
Yeah.
Am I simply reacting to the stimuli, or am I choosing in accordance with my highest values? And this is the difference.
See, so for me, from my perspective, which is probably a bit different from yours, I feel about free will. I feel okay. Free will is good and decision whatever, but I feel as though for basically through things like meditation I've done is that I'm in touch with another part of me, which is there for my benefit. And I'll use that in a broader sense. It's for me to achieve some spiritual enlightenment. So I try and pull on that, for want of a word, inner being, as you call it, of me, to make the right decisions to move forward in a more spiritual way, more trying to make this life better, not just for me, but whoever's around me. So is that again a free will, or is that because if I'm touching onto that higher consciousness of myself, is that something different again?
I think that's about as close to free will as you can get in this world.
Okay.
Honestly, it is what happens when I get there. If I have cosmic consciousness and am truly aware of the entire universe, and
which you are, John. I've noticed that.
then I can make choices. But if I am this entity here, John, then I have accumulated the knowledge of how to be John and operate through this vehicle. That's what I mean, is that the free will becomes clouded by the accretion of bias.
So we're, in a sense, we're all, I use the word fighting a battle. We're actually trying to, I think what I'm trying to get at here is the real essence of life is actually to instate free will without any bias. I think that will be the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I can get on board with that.
I think that will be the ultimate goal. So, yes, there's free will there, but free will is tainted. So if you can then if you can get to the point where you can use free will without any emotional, mental, or outside bias, you're on the right track.
Yeah.
That's a pretty heavy conversation we've been having here, John. I wonder if this has got that, because
I didn't expect it to go to this position, but
it's gone quite deep, isn't it? Really.
It's really like in the yoga, self-surrender to Ishvara.
Yeah.
It's surrender to the divinity within and allow that to operate. And it's funny. It's like by giving away intellectual control.
Yeah.
You gain free will.
It's actually getting to that point in life where you can do that, whether it's through yoga or it's through some other means. It's getting to that point in life where you do it, and I think that's where if people are on the spiritual path, that's where you should try and head if you can. It's not an easy journey.
I think it's a goal worth aspiring to.
Yeah, it's a long journey, and can be quite exciting in its own way.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we've covered that subject pretty thoroughly.
Well, I don't know about thoroughly, but I think it would get a lot more esoteric if we kept going.
Yeah, and I think hopefully it's given the listener something to think about. And I think this is what we're trying to do in this podcast, is get our listeners to think about their life and what's going on in it in a spiritual sense,
I think the
metaphysical
basic
sense.
message is you can examine your own behaviour, and if you don't like it, you can change it, and that's free will.
True. That's the simplest term. Wow, John, that was really good. I think you've topped that off pretty well. Well, I think that's for us. So, as we said before, please do not hesitate to get in touch with us. We'd love to hear your views, your points, and anything you'd like discussed as well. We're happy to do that. So, John will now give you the email address,
which is metvizcompanion@gmail.com. That's METPHYS companion, all one word, @gmail.com.
Now, if you're enjoying our podcast, please share it with your friends. We would really appreciate that. And bottom line is, I look forward to talking to you again next week.
Hope to have you with us then.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.